When working with Service Bus, messages can land in the dead letter queues. Depending on the reason, we might want to handle the messages in different ways. I want to monitor the dead letter queues and process the messages there. In this video, I look at how Serverless 360 can help me to both monitor and process them. To give Serverless 360 access to my Azure account, I configure a service principal that have permissions in my Service Bus. I set a client ID and a secret, and then I save. Monitoring profiles allows me to treat several resources in the same way. You can create multiple profiles to handle different scenarios. It could be that you have different thresholds that you want to use. We give it a name and a description. And then next, we select the type of resources, which metric or property to monitor, and set the threshold values. My Service Bus resources are just part of a solution. To group monitoring profiles of different parts of my solution in a logical way, I create a business application in Serverless 360. I give it a name and a description. Then I select the service principal that I want to use. Then we select the resources to include. In this case, we're going to monitor 4 different queues. After selecting Next, we will be able to select the monitoring profile we want to use, or if you don't want to use a predefined, here you can configure what to monitor and set the thresholds, but we use the one that we created previously. To configure my alerts, I set time zone, frequency of evaluation, and other important values for alerting. I leave a thorough description of them outside of the scope of this video. That said, one setting I find important is to receive a report only if there are any errors. But that's a question of taste. After saving, we navigate to the queues and see that some of them are healthy while others are in error states. Now I will start receiving alerts with the chosen interval. So great. Now we're monitoring the queues. Now I want to start automating processing of the messages there to minimize manual work. I navigate to automated tasks and choose to create new configuration for processing dead letter messages. You can automate resubmit and delete, or just delete messages. While performing a task, you can configure to back up the messages to a storage account. I choose to resubmit, which will send the messages to a queue, topic, or API endpoint. In my case, I'm interested in sending some of the messages to an API endpoint that will handle those messages. I select the queue to process, enter address, method, and other information needed to call the API. Additionally, add some custom headers. That could be things like a subscription key. It could be other information that is needed for the API to route the message or to handle it. I want to filter out just a subset of the messages, and that based on dead letter reason. In this case, I want the ones that have my custom invalid return date reason. Additionally, I want to back up the messages to blob storage. Next, we enter the scheduling information that is needed for when the messages should be processed. We set the notification settings and save the task that now is ready to run. To delete the messages from the delete queue, I add an additional configuration with the same filter as the one that I use for resubmitting. Ideally, the backup should be configured here on deleting instead of when I'm submitting, to be sure that the messages are backed up in all cases. We execute just to test, and if we look in Bceptor, we see as the messages come in, we see the message body, and we see the additional headers. We go to the storage account and look at the container that was created and look at the file that was created for one of the messages. We see that we have the headers and the message body that we have there. We see that we have some notifications, and if we look at the emails that I have configured, we see the notifications. We have the alerts showing the state of the queues and how the thresholds that we look at. Also the execution of the deletion, and we see that we have deleted the messages. So I can process also resubmit and delete. So here I have selected one queue for processing and take the messages that have invalid schema reason and send them to another file. Hope you liked this video on how you can automate monitoring and handling of dead letter messages with serverless 360.